Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 15.3 top lane tier list. So if you content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch. We saw some relatively big system changes in the attack speed going up from 2.5 to 3. Doesn't really affect top lane. We also saw Atakan get adjusted again. This is the revive one. They've increased the stasis duration. We've also seen some direct champion buffs. We've seen the likes of Quinn, Nasus, Swain, Jax all get buffed. And then some nerfs towards the likes of Cassiopeia and Teemo, who are overperforming in Cassiopeia's case across multiple roles and across multiple brackets. In Teemo's case, mostly across just low elo. He's been performing quite well there for a while. Wukong got tagged because of jungle, and it directly affects him within the top lane. But the D tier, let's get into it. The champions here are going to remain the same. We've got the likes of Lee Sin, who has been struggling in the solo lane for a while, so much so that I just haven't added him on here. But Lee Sin is going to remain as a D tier pick. He's just something I wouldn't really recommend unless you are very comfortable with playing the champion. You understand how to make him work within the lane. But even then, he's not quite the same, like, Gordrink or Ravenous Hydra Emax, which was, like, the previous iteration that he used to be. You're playing much more around just hoping you can find the angles to just solo kill your laner and accelerate leads through doing that. Smolder solo lane is still underperforming. He did receive the IE ratio on Q change last patch, and that did help him. It enables him to be a bit better in some of those tanky matchups, which you traditionally would have played him in pre the changes to him, which increased his gold scaling but nerfed down his wave clear. You can play him into the likes of Cassante. He's still not a pick I'd really recommend. If you want another, well, I mean, actually there's multiple good range picks into Cassante, but if you want another kind of off-meta good range pick into Cassante, Corki is really good into Cassante. The reduction of MR and armor on Corki's E really hurts Cassante's ability to ever really trade in that lane. It's kind of a hidden, like, known strong counter to Cassante, and definitely something you can opt into if you understand or play Corki and maybe you've gone from ADC to top. There's options there, but if you want something a bit more off meta, that is definitely an example of an option. But yeah, Sword remains as a D tier pick. Udyr is going to be my other option here. Still underperforms in his current state ever since they did that nerf to him where they took a decent chunk of power from his R and empowered R. He's just never really found his footing again here. He has seen competitive play. Like, I don't think this champ is non-viable. You can definitely make him work, but he's not as strong as he used to be, and you need to really understand the champion. You can't just simply stat check as well as you used to, and that does hurt him in the current state of the game. Jace is pretty close to the D tier. He received a lot of base damage nerfs this patch, mostly focused around getting him off the tank build. The tank build is basically gone. I ran the numbers for, like, the tank, the bruiser, and the AD variation. The AD variation usually breaks even about 18 minutes, and then you're stronger about 20 when you go into Atakan. The bruiser build is going to be weaker for longer. Like, you'll probably need to go like 25, 30, like 3 items to really make that build kind of break even from where it used to be. And yeah, the tank build just isn't something you're really going to consider anymore. In the AD build's case, I would recommend trying the Youmu's into Manamune build. You can obviously in the top lane go the Eclipse Manamune. That tends to be something a bit more competitive. In mid lane, yeah, you're just going that Youmu's, as you can just run around and be a lot more mobile across the map. And then you can opt into like lethality, or I mean, traditionally, yeah, you're just going to opt into lethality, like your Edge of Knights, your Chevalier, your Shrouders. You've got options in, like, more if you are playing for, like, Jack of all trades stacks, which is a rune I'll definitely recommend trying on him. But Airy, First Strike, Conqueror, Phase Rush, all very solid rune options on him, especially if you want access to the likes of Gathering Storm, Absolute Focus, and yeah, Jack of all trades, so you can get a lot more adaptive and really make use of the bonus AD ratios on him. Yeah, so traditionally he comes in as a counter pick into ranged options within the top lane. If you don't play him, I wouldn't really recommend just like first timing him within the top lane, but if you are comfortable and you've played him a lot mid, he can definitely be an option for you here, especially if you are like aware of what you're playing into. Rumble is a very, very high elo pro play jailed champion. This pick requires a lot of time on him. He tends to require a bit more of a controlled game to really make use of his really powerful ultimate, and the laning phase, like dragging that out and just making use of the fact that you don't draw minion aggro when you're casting your abilities, which makes it really easy to just stand in front of the wave and really like chunk people out, tends to just be a skill more prevalent the higher up you go. He's a pick I wouldn't really recommend lower down unless you're very comfortable on the champion. Cassante tends to underperform in lower MMR brackets. I mean, that's no surprise. He is an early game skewed tank, which tends to be built around his ability to bully in lane, and then translating that into power later on using his like peeling tools, his shielding to protect the carry in a lot of situations. I think he's a great champion. I mean, he's number one champion in competitive for top lane at the moment. Like, he's definitely still very solid. But for solo queue, he's a pick I'd really recommend avoiding, like especially the lower rank you go. You want something with a bit more agency, which Cassante tends to lack, and he just doesn't, like in extended games, if you're not getting like huge advantages, he can definitely struggle compared to some of the other tank options. Cyrus is a conditional counter pick. He can work really nicely into like your Swains, your Nars, your Malphites, for example. Outside of that, though, he's just dependent on ultimates, and if your laning phase is really rough against a specific champion, it can be hard to get value out of this pick, especially if you're just not picking him into situations with good ultimates. Swain is going to move up to the high end of the C tier. I was close to moving him into the B tier. The buffs this patch were really nice, it really helped him, but he still really struggles into high mobility bruisers, which can just gap close onto you. He wants to be played into compositions which can have a hard time like punishing him, and he can oftentimes just stat stick using his ultimate. If you put yourself in those situations, maybe you're playing against like a Cassante, Skarner topside, he is a very effective pick and definitely like climbs the tier list aggressively. If you enjoy playing Swain, I think top lane Swain is back to being a good, like an option there for you. If you want to play him in a role he's a bit more competitive in, bot lane, mid lane tend to be his best two options, and then top lane and then support is traditionally just his worst role. He does still underperform there as an option. Victor remains as a C tier pick. He's lost a lot of his play rate in the top lane mode to the point where he'll probably end up getting removed next patch. They went after his AP ratios on 15.2. It hurts for builds where you are opting into a lot of AP. The top lane build, where if you're going like your Grasp and your Icebawns, doesn't get hit as much, but it is still going to traditionally underperform unless you play it in the right scenarios. He's definitely a lot more conditional as an option here. I would have him as a C tier pick at the moment. Gwen, Yone, Gangplank, all very high skill ceiling champions. If you compile these picks well, they do like climb quite aggressively. Gwen is a great option into tanks and can often really heavily spike at like free items and take over games. The likes of Yone also pretty good into tanks. You can run Bork, and just oftentimes they never really have the damage to kill you, and then you can utilize your Bork sustain and your like extended trading patterns to just like win out on sides, and it can make it very hard for you to be matched. Gangplank, if you can play him well, he is a very effective pick. I really like Gangplank as an option. I would recommend watching Sodabaka, obviously, if you want to like learn Gangplank. If you're not comfortable playing Gangplank, he's not mandatory, but he is, I'd say he's a pretty chill champion to just have within your arsenal if you've put a lot of games into him. I believe Arcane Comet is for Keystone, which I've seen some people running, but there are other options like Grasps, for example, which I know were being run a bit more in the past. Pantheon, Sion, two of my other remaining C2 options. I don't think Sion is in the greatest spot at the moment. I believe that Heartsteel is definitely weaker compared to where it was in the previous season, and that does affect him, obviously, if he is going that. I believe Unending Despair is also a slightly weaker option. It was overpowered last season, don't get me wrong, it is still a okay option, but not quite gonna be like as strong as an option on him. Other than that, you can go like your 80 bruiser builds, like your Titanics, your Sterix, all solid options which you can opt into. Obviously Sterix works really nicely if you are opting into a Spirit, so you get a bit more shielding, and if you have like the Unending, you can just print shields and healing quite a bit within the game. Overall, I think the pick can still work, but I do have him as a C2 option at the moment. Pantheon's case, never really been a huge fan of him. He is so predicated predicated on getting early advantages to be a functional pick, that I think he loses a lot of value. What you could argue is that the increase in value is where he comes in as a flex pick. Most people won't know which role he's going to until a lot later on in the draft, and that can definitely help your team a bit. Obviously, Pantheon is a viable mid laner, jungler, support, and top laner at the moment, so he's a full role flex pick. But in the top lane, I do think he's still slightly underperformed, so I do have him as a C tier option. Couple picks moving up then, we've got the likes of Fiora, who was probably slightly underrated last patch, but with the true damage amp buff this patch, she is definitely really benefiting from opting into like a PTA setup. That's definitely something I would recommend people try a bit more. Obviously, you can go like your Grasp and your Conqueror still. They can be quite good in specific spots, but PTA definitely looks like a really viable option. Pure obviously has really accessible ways of proccing it. Having the E auto reset and just being able to trade into someone is very nice. So I am going to bump her up to the B tier. Quinn, Nasa's other two champions which got buffed this patch, definitely doing a bit better. Quinn gained 20% attack speed on her first max ability, which is huge. That really does help her, allows her to extend the trade a bit more with the additional attack speed. And even with the lethality builds, it's still going to be nice. You're still going to be able to auto a bit more within the fights. So yeah, she moves up a tier. Also helps with CSing. Quinn is a beta option now. Nasa's gained back some life still. It's still not really enough. I still think this champion is slightly underpowered, especially like compared to where he should be for lower MMR brackets. But you take what you're given. 3% life steal does allow him to be sustain more, be a bit more durable with a laning phase, makes him harder to dive, and yeah, I'd bump him up to the B tier because of that. He could probably do with a bit more though, like 5 damage on Q. I could really see this champion like being bumped back up to the A tier, but right now, yeah, sits as a B tier option. Vayne is within my beta at the moment. I think Vayne is doing a bit better in the top lane at the moment. She does have like different build options. You have your Trinities, your Krakens, your Borks, and overall, yeah, I'd say she is in a relatively solid spot if you are like aware that you can still be like most range options are going to be punished in the top lane, especially if you are like spam ganked and you don't have the correct vision placement done. That is when you'll find yourself going like 08, 09 within games and definitely struggling a lot more than what you probably should be. But if you can like have the control, your jungler's playing the game relatively well, like helping you out or like playing around what you have kind of set up, diving the enemy when they need to be dove, then Vayne is a pretty solid option. Have her as a beta. Traditionally going to be played into tanks though, champions which can't ever really punish her. You are going to struggle into highly mobile skirmishers, bruisers, which can punish you if you overstep or you misplace slightly. Jax remains as a beta option. He goes from the low end of the beta to the high end of the beta. Definitely benefited from the buffs this patch. They were pretty small though. Like the mana regen is honestly probably the biggest thing about Jax, which helped him because Jax has mana problems. That's a pretty well-known fact. He, ever since they buffed the mana cost on ult from 50 to 100, it can be quite heavy to rotate a full combo onto someone. But the free health growth per level was nice, and the plus I believe it was 5 to 15 damage on the third hit. It was also nice. Like, it's just excess damage which you're getting access to. It helps his extended trading builds a bit more. It helps armor and MR purchases a bit more because obviously when you have larger pool of base health, you want more resist to go alongside it. Overall, Jax sits as like a high beta option. I think this champion is still really good in the right spots but can struggle into champions which don't really care about counter-strike value for the most part, but like Gragas, for example, who can kind of just nullify it. Ambessa sits as a beta option. This champion has a very high skill ceiling. She's still, I believe, number 3 or maybe number 2 competitive option now. After they've nerfed Jace this patch, that will definitely tag him slightly. So Ambessa, sits within my beta at the moment, but has a very high skill ceiling. If you play her, if you pilot her really well, she can be a very effective way to climb. She has a pretty raw damage build, what's the item? Voltaic Cycler Sword and Edge of Night variants where you're playing a lot more into just raw burst damage. But you have the extended builds, you have your Shojans, your Eclipses, your Kaliva variants. She has options in what she can opt into, and overall, I'd say the champion sits as a solid B option for average solo queue. The higher up you go, she obviously performs better. The lower down you go, the worse she performs. Trundle, I mean, the pick is in a weird spot. He is not very popular both jungle and top. Obviously, this is a pretty well-known fact. The champion is pretty one-dimensional on what he can do. But if you are playing in, like, I'd say maybe plat, close to emerald and below, this champion is a very effective way to climb. The likes of, I mean, very similar to the likes of Yorick. People won't understand or just like have the macro to play against a pick like this, and he will just split and take over the game and utilize that advantage to stat check anyone who tries to fight him, and yeah, will be a pretty clear win con for the pick. The higher up you go, obviously people will punish this, people will understand to just not leave you on a side lane alone. They'll have champions which can often traditionally wave clear. The likes of Victory will just nullify you for a solid, like, until the next wave arrives, and then you'll have to try and siege again. But yeah, the pick better the lower down you are, the higher MMR is going to struggle a bit more. He's not a pick I'd recommend sticking with, but he can be situationally good. Like into champions which can't really deal with his siege and stat checky nature, they can definitely struggle into a pick like this. Alawi is still within my B tier. This champion has some very polarizing matchups. If you can consistently rotate E onto a target, this champion can feel very hard to ever play against and can obviously output a huge amount of damage. If you're playing into a mobile champion which can kind of like kite you out, or you're playing into ranged and they don't really ever need to initiate into you and can permanently kind of sit out of E range, then this champion really struggles. And I think that is her biggest weakness at the moment. I think Alawi is just a relatively unhealthy champion though, full stop. Like this pick has some relatively frustrating like gameplay patterns. Like I mean, her E is a lose-lose case. Either you're slowed and you have to walk out of range, which can oftentimes deny you minions, or you try and trade into her, and oftentimes you'll just lose that trade because she is a stats checky juggernaut. So the pick probably could do with some work. She's not that popular altogether at the moment, so gonna have her in the B tier. But yeah, the pick can function in the right spots, definitely. Varus, I think, is in a relatively good spot for top lane at the moment. Not like health-wise. I think Varus is obviously a relatively unhealthy champion in the top lane. He does a very, very aggressive split of damage, which can be very hard for most champions to build against, and the tanks which want to build against him, he has percentage health against. So it can be quite rough. This pick obviously likes the Ginsu's Hullbreaker build, and I think it is pretty fucking solid on him at the moment. So if you enjoy your Varus, then yeah, sits as a B tier pick. If you opt into like the AP builds, I do think they're slightly weak though at the moment, so they would probably drop him slightly down. But Varus, I think, is in a pretty good spot for top lane at the moment. But you want to pick him a bit more matchup dependent. He can do very well into tanks, and once again, like Vayne, struggle into some of those higher mobility options. Ryze is still a pretty good top laner. Obviously, the traditional matchups are like your Kennons and champions, which you can kind of just shut down their engages, and like they have relatively small health pools, so you can just burst them out and deny them from really being able to approach the wave. I think this pick's got some scaling to it as well. Isn't the weakest early on into the game, but once like that first level 6 kicks in and you get the bonus damage on overload, that's where the champion really gets access to a lot of its wave clear and can really like output a huge amount of damage within fights. Tryndamere, kind of akin to the likes of Alawi, just not a particularly healthy gameplay pattern at the moment. The ability to just trade into someone, I hope that you RNG crits and then sustain like off the wave with Ravenous Hydra Fleet and all those sustain runes which I mention every video I make on him. This champion, relatively like clear game plan, just wants to be able to split aggressively into you. He will just trade into your tower. If you're a champion which can't deal with it, you will really struggle. And if your champion can deal with it, this pick just relies on RNG to kind of like find his advantages. Overall, not the healthiest pick at the moment. I think he could probably do some work, but he does sit as a B2 option. I think some of these champions with their unhealthy gameplay patterns can be have pretty high highs if they are in the right spots, but then also be pretty lackluster if they're just not able to really roll the things they want. Aurora, I mean, Electrocute being buffed this patch does help her, especially for people who were still opting into Electrocute last patch when it looked like it was pretty much correct to run Arcing. Well, actually, no, that was mid lane. Okay, so Electrocute in the top lane tends to be a bit more performant than the likes of Grasp and Comet, I believe. But even then, I think Comet is still more performant as an option. Overall, yeah, pick the keystone you need within the game. This champion still sits in the beta at the moment. I still think it is very hard to pilot oftentimes and can be quite punishable, especially lower down. But if you are, if you understand how to play Aurora quite well, you're spacing effectively, you're utilizing the correct keystones within the correct games, this champion is still very oppressive in higher MMRs, especially, what was the Arcane Comet build in the previous patch. I don't know if you're, always want to swap over to Electrocute. I think it is probably conditionally good, but Comet does give access to some really powerful second minor runes, which you do want, like some Mana Flow, Transcendent, Scorch, or Gathering. It really depends what you want on this champion. Vladimir sits as a beta option. I think Vladimir is in a relatively good spot at the moment, especially, both top and mid. This pick, obviously, if you can get him through laning phase and he's hard to assail, can be a really effective 2-3 item champion. He can burst out carries pretty easily if you can get access to the enemy backline. I'd say he sits as a very solid beta option. He can struggle into other matchups though, the ones which won't give him that breathing room early, and can consistently just clear waves, push into him, and look to do other things around the map whilst he's trying to really scale up and get his items online. That can definitely be where some of his weaknesses lie. Maokai is definitely a lot weaker at the moment. I still have him here because he's relatively simple to play, and you can kind of just pick him up on the fly and just be useful as an option. But if you want to invest time into a champion, Maokai is just not one of those picks. He's kind of akin to Malphite in a way, where very easy to pick champions, can slot in can be slot in when you need them to be slot in. You can't slot in Malphite anywhere. He is primarily just locked to a B4, B5, R5 pick. Maokai is a bit more general. You can pick Maokai at most points because he's obviously a three-way flex pick as well. But yeah, these picks are champions which just don't really need time investment into. If you play them once or twice, you'll kind of understand what you need to do and achieve within the game. Yeah, there are better picks which I'd recommend over them, though at the moment I don't think either of these picks are in the greatest spots they've been in. Mundo also struggling a bit at the moment. The heart still changes and the unending despair changes definitely hurt him. He drops from the higher tiers to more a B2 option, even though this should be where he really thrives as a pick. The mid to low MMR brackets is where Mundo does best traditionally. Gragas and Renekton wrap up the B tier. I believe both these champions, actually I'm going to drop 2 more picks down. So Gragas and Renekton are the remaining champions within the B tier. I think both these picks great in elite play. Renekton does what he is the jack of all trades top laner. He has a point and click CC, traditionally has pretty good, has good wave clear, good early game, good mid game, falls off later on into the game, but then he just acts as a health bar for your carries traditionally. I think this pick he's there. He is a good option when you need him. I think there are better picks for just continue which you can invest time into in solo queue and win going up towards master. But Renekton is just a champion you can always have at the back of your mind and just opt into if you find the right angle for it. Gragas also pretty elite skewed, great for neutralizing lane, a great AP option, has both the AP build for tanky bruiser build, and yeah, can be a very effective pick. So I do think he deserves a spot within the B tier at the moment. Tahm Kench and Akali drop down. Tahm Kench has definitely suffered from Twitter, which is really funny to say, because before a bunch of Twitter clips were showing Tahm Kench as this unkillable raid boss option, he was good. Tahm Kench was a very, very good pick, especially within top lane. He was one of the premier picks which I would recommend every patch. Problem is, Twitter found him, and now he's not very good anymore. So they nerfed him 3 times. They nerfed his AP ratios, they nerfed his base armor, they nerfed his Q base damage, and he suffered. Tahm Kench is a champion which is now very much prohibited from being he struggles in higher ranks. Tahm Kench is basically getting close to being non-viable Master Plus. I still think you can climb with him to Master, the same as Mundo and obviously most of the champions on this list. As long as you enjoy them and you're comfortable on the pick, that matters more than any sort of meta kind of especially going towards Master. Obviously Master Plus, it's a bit different, but yeah, Tahm Kench drops down to the B tier now. He's definitely struggling compared to where he used to be. I still think he's a fine option though. He's kind of like Mundo, where you give him the heart still stacks and you give him the gold, and he will oftentimes just be able to print a decent amount of damage and then kind of be quite a frustrating champion to play against. Akali, honestly might have been a case of that when Electrocute got removed, a lot of people swapped over to Conqueror, which was, I mean, Conqueror Akali's good, don't get me wrong. Like, I think a Conqueror Akali can be very effective into, like, higher health pools and where you're rotating a lot of combos. But Electrocute still looks to be slightly on the underperformance side in the top lane. In mid lane, I believe Electrocute does outperform Conqueror now, though, so if you're playing in the right matchups, then yeah, definitely try Electrocute, like the squishier matchups. Into extended matchups, so you want to be playing Conqueror. That being said, I think Kali is not quite an A tier option. I think I had a slightly too high rated. But yeah, it still sits as like a good B tier option. Though I think if you pick a Kali in the right spots and you're comfortable on the champion, then yeah, she's a great pick at the moment. Moving on to the A tier, then I am bumping Poppy back up. I feel like I've moved Poppy down to the B tier. I think I went Poppy from A to B to A again. I think Poppy should probably sit in the A tier, like a low A tier. I think I ever like constantly bouncing between the high B tiers and the low A tiers. This champion's great in the right spots. Like the W is an incredibly powerful ability. She has good early game like power, but like if you opt into like Scorched Endurance Blade and like flat HP, it can be very hard to trade against this champion. She works really nicely into the likes of Cassante, and yeah, he tends to be a pretty popular champion, especially the higher up you go. I think she's a pick which is great to learn. Like you should probably always have Poppy as an option if that is like your playstyle, like you like those juggernaut tanky options, which or bruiser even options. Poppy can kind of opt into like all three classes depending on what she needs within the game. Overall though, at the moment, I do think she sits as a low A tier pick. Karma, doing a lot better. The Axiom Arcanist bug really helped Karma, and well, like when they fixed it, it really helped Karma. I think this pick is a great enchanter from the top lane. Probably the best enchanter from the top lane. I don't believe there are many others which are like viable at the moment. I think Lulu, I know like some people play her in the top lane, and like Sorakas and stuff are more in the past. Like people don't really do that stuff anymore. But yeah, Karma as a forefront option, being able to output a huge amount of damage, wave clear, like early on into the game, and then acting as a like a poke champion with shielding later on, is an effective option. I don't really think she's the greatest for climbing in solo queue. I think there are like obviously conditions you want to play her in, and like obviously you are giving up some solo agency when you pick a champion like this, like is more reliant with like a hyper carry later on to the game, or like just a general carry. But yeah, I'd have her as an A tier option in her current state. Garen I should have towards the higher end of the A tier. This pick is definitely getting real close to the S tier. The Axiom Arcanist, like phase rush. Okay, well, so the main things which like changed for Garen is Axiom Arcanist got added to the game. It's really good on him. He really likes it. Definitely helped him a bit. But people moved over to Swifties finally. Swifties is the strongest boot in the game at the moment, and Garen being incredibly mobile and just not really ever being catchable when he procs phase rush makes it very effective on him. Like the W tenacity combined with the phase rush movement speed and the Swifties movement speed just make this champion really, really hard to lock down, and yeah, certain team compositions just can't really play against that. I think Garen definitely sits towards the high end of the A tier. He still scales really well. He still outputs a huge amount of damage in fights. Yeah, I think he's a great option if you enjoy that kind of champion at the moment. He's also the most popular top laner in the game, so I love it when like the popular champions basically kind of warp the meta slightly. Because Garen is strong, that means Camille. Oh, I mean, Garen is popular, that means Camille is going to be slightly stronger, because Camille obviously does quite well into Garen. So you can always look at these things and then look at like win rates and like certain aspects of the game. Is like, is this champion actually really good, or is it just like really benefiting from specific picks being like popular within the meta? So if a pick's good into Garen Darius, and it traditionally does quite well, so just something to be aware of. What else we got here? Shen sits within the A tier. I think the Dead Man's build is good. I don't like Hollow Radiance, even though a lot of people go with the build. I think Titanic Hydra is a better option for having more agency, having more wave clear, doing a bit more damage within the game. I think, yeah, try Titanic in some of the AP matchups. Obviously, sometimes you will just need to pick up some magic resist if you are being like toasted by a Rumble, for example. But yeah, Deadman's really nice into AD matchups. I'm going to also recommend it on Ornn at the moment. I think Ornn with Deadman's is very solid. I don't like the two Sunfire items. I think both of them lack great stats, and then the Barmy's passive tends to be pretty low in value, especially the later on into the game you go, where most champions in the game just have good wave clear in their kits. Obviously, Ornn can struggle a bit more if you can't kill a wave with like QWE, but he's usually fine. Like, Shen has more issues. Like, Shen does kind of need to opt into wave clear, otherwise he does have some of the weakest wave clear within the game. But yeah, I think Dead Man's on Ornn, definitely something to consider. I do really think it's great, especially in games where you just don't really want to be building full Sunfire. Kennen sits as an A tier option. He obviously does a lot better in Elite. He is like one of the top AP Elite options. He is very mobile. He is a great team fighting ultimate, great harass within lane. He's just a bit harder to pilot, and that's why he's a bit lower down on the A tier. But if you can pilot Kennen well, he's a great option. I really do think you should probably be playing Kennen at the moment. Some of your niche picks are the likes of Heimerdinger, your Kleds, your there's one more here, your Singe. All these picks pretty decent. Like, they are pretty good in the right spots. Obviously, if you're an OTP, you're just playing these champions no matter what. Kled obviously has incredibly oppressive early game power, and his dives are some of the strongest within the game, to the point where I'm surprised he doesn't see some level of competitive play. I think Kled could definitely be an option in competitive. Obviously, he is a one-trick mostly champion, so people who haven't put the time into him just won't really play him. But yeah, Heimerdinger, Singed, obviously have their unique ways of playing the game. Heimerdinger's turrets and damage can be really oppressive. Singed's ability to like disrupt fights and proxy is also is a pretty unique thing. And if people don't understand how to play against it, you can oftentimes just win games through doing that. Aurelia, Riven are some of the higher skill champions up towards the top here. I have Camille here alongside them. All three of these picks are doing quite well at the moment. In Riven's case, she obviously performs really well with, all three of them perform really well with like games put into them. Camille isn't as dependent on games as the other two, but still wants a lot of mastery on the champion. Camille great into compositions which can't really manage against her on side, where she can isolate a target and be really powerful against them. Aurelia obviously still very strong early, struggles a bit later on in the game. They have taken away a lot of her late game damage over time, and Riven just wants so much gold. If you give Riven gold, she prints damage. Like, that is the main thing going for this champion. Wukong got nerfed this patch. He drops from the higher end of the A tier to the lower end of the A tier. Definitely not quite the hidden top laner anymore, like hidden strong top laner anymore. The power loss is noticeable, and I'd have him just as a A tier option now. Yeah, he can still be flexed here, just not going to be as effective as he was in the previous patch. Yorick, Set, good low elo options, tend to struggle a bit more the higher up you go. I'm going to actually move Ornn and Shen a bit lower down. But yeah, Yorick and, what was the other one? Yeah, Yorick, I actually have like Volibear around the same kind of area. All three of these picks, great in low elo. They tend to be, in Yorick's, in Set and Volibear's case, they're pretty early game skewed. They need early game advantages. They're kind of akin to like Pantheon, where they are pretty predicated on that, and then utilizing that to snowball the game. In Yorick's case, he's better than Trundle in lower MMRs at the moment, lower MMR brackets at the moment. If you give him like the time on side to just siege, he will end the game. That is just something Yorick will do. He has one of the strongest split pushes in the game, especially when you pair him with Maiden. Obviously, if people understand the macro and how to play against Yorick, and they deal with Maiden, they deny him from ever really getting the positions he wants to be put into, then the champion struggles a lot more, and that is why I never really recommend him higher up. Obviously, Slog Dog does make him work. Definitely recommend checking out some of the videos which they make. Other than that, though, I would recommend, that would be the person I'd actually recommend. I believe they play on Oceania. I don't remember, though. But there's loads of different players of different champions. What else we got here? So Aatrox actually have towards the higher end of the A tier. I think Aatrox and Olaf are really good A tier options, the likes of Darius as well. I think these picks are definitely performing a lot better at the moment. Olaf is very unpopular. I believe he's the most unpopular main role top laner in the game at the moment. So he's pretty unique. Most people don't understand how to play against him that well. Aatrox is just performing great. I mean, Aatrox performs really well into tanks, and he can like function against most other matchups. Like if you are playing like the Shojin Voltaic Psychosaur build, or you're playing the Eclipse variant, or you're playing the Cinder Sky variant, it really depends on what you need within the game. He just performs well. Like Aatrox is in a really good spot at the moment. And yeah, Darius, great if you're looking for a champion with a very oppressive early game, but still functional later on into the game. Like Darius is still a champion which, if you give him a reset, he can take over late game fights and output a huge amount of damage there as well. I think he's a very deserving high A tier option. Some of the other A tier options we've got here are the likes of Gnar, who probably sits towards the like more middle of the pack. He has a pretty high skill ceiling, but I think he's definitely doing a lot better in solo queue at the moment. He really benefits from matchups like what's the one? Cassante. That's the one I always pick him into. I'm so familiar with that matchup at this point. He's great in that situation where like Cassante can never really approach him and like fight him. Like Gnar has the tools to kind of just kite him out. Other than that though, like Gnar has other good matchups. Like don't get me wrong, like Cassante is just the one which is like, I'm very familiar with. Yeah, the pick does a lot of damage, great on sides, great in team fights, great when you get like access to items. He really does want Trinity though, like Trinity, Sturk, Cleaver, all very nice items on him. And then like Wit's End, Randuins are good later on. Yeah, no, great A tier option at the moment. Cassiopeia, it's actually gonna remain in my S tier. I'm gonna have Zac towards the lower end of the A tier. I think the champion's still a good top laner. Like he's unpopular, obviously, but some of the direct nerfs to him have definitely taken him down. He's not quite the S tier, unmovable, like permanently healing blob in the top lane. He's more average. I'd have him alongside the other tanks in the A tier. He's still a good option, but not gonna be the guaranteed win which you might. I mean, I say guaranteed. Not gonna be the win which he might have once been. Teemo got nerfed this patch. He drops towards the middle of the A tier. He was a high A tier option. The nerfs didn't really shift him that much. He still sits as a solid A tier option. Great in low elo. Tends to perform worse the higher up you go. But yeah, gonna have him within the A tier. And then we have and Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is gonna be my other champion within the A tier. He probably could move up to the S tier. I think Cho'Gath is very strong at the moment. Especially, I mean, the grass build is obviously very good. You can opt into like a Q-Max Arcane Comet. You can also opt into a Halo Blades variant of Cho'Gath with like a Shorelia and a Deadman. There's loads of different ways of playing Cho'Gath in his current state. He performs really well though. He's definitely a pick I would recommend learning. He's probably my recommended premier tank of the top lane at the moment. Especially, yeah, if you want someone with a bit more flexibility, he is pretty solid in that aspect. Still clunky, still relatively telegraphed. He can be played around, but yeah, definitely doing a lot better at the moment. He has been buffed a lot. He is very stats checking in nature at the moment, to the point where like I believe his Q does like 320 damage or something at max rank, which is crazy. Like we've gone to the point where like that is like just a flat damage value on this champion. But yeah, I mean, it gives you an idea of just that, like his weakness has basically led to him being buffed in a stat checky way. My S tier picks then, I believe Cassiopeia is weaker, but still probably deserves a spot within the S tier. The champion obviously lost 5% AP ratio on Q, 5% AP ratio on W. W is 5 ticks, so it is technically 25% AP ratio if they stay within the full duration of it. Obviously, that is unlikely to happen, but it is definitely damage down. She's a bit weaker, sits towards the low end of the S tier rather than like the number 1/2 pick, which I would recommend in the previous patch. Kayle and Mordekaiser are my next 2 picks here. Mordekaiser, great within mid to low MMR. Very stat checky, very hard for most people to play against. Most people will just lose in your ultimate, and you'll be able to just snowball that advantage, take over the game, win. Like as long as you trade like 1 for 2 or 1 for even 3 in team fights, you are getting value. You are being a really useful member of the team, and you will oftentimes just win through doing that. Kayle obviously scales incredibly well. Games are going on longer in mid and low MMR, and she really benefits from that. If you can get her to her level 16 breakpoint consistently, she is a very, very high damage option and will oftentimes just take over games at that kind of point. And then Warwick and I got on my 2 they are the closest thing to the S Plus at the moment. I still think Warwick is an incredible option. He is very early game skewed, but he is very stat checky by nature. The changes which they made to him ended up, I mean, like, he's less clunky than before. He's still not the cleanest of champions. He can still definitely feel a bit janky in certain spots, but the pick can output a huge amount of damage. He is very hard for a lot of people to understand how to play against him. Oftentimes, if the enemy just knows, like, just plays safe and denies him from being able to get any advantage from laning phase, then he will fall off and he will become less valuable in team fights later on in the game, where he just doesn't have the durability and the damage to like maintain uptime within fights. And Argot should have been nerfed this patch. We'll probably get nerfed in 15.4. He is the premier top lane pick, especially in mid and lower MMR. People will just let you get to level 13 freely. He spikes incredibly hard on like a Cleaver Stoic or a Cleaver Hubris spike. And yeah, you can take over games by the time Atakan spawns at 20 minutes. That is when you are usually fully online. You output so much damage. It is so hard for most people to like fight against you. That combined with, yeah, his early game's not bad. Like his level 1 through 3 are pretty solid. He does struggle 3 till 9 traditionally, and then 9 till 13 can be a bit weaker. But if you play around the times where you are going to struggle a bit more and you just make sure you're getting as much XP as possible, he's an incredibly effective pick at the moment. He is the pick I would recommend everyone plays in his current state. If you want the builds, it's Cleaver, Steric, Jack Show, and then like Deadman's Overlords, I believe, for like the Bruiser variant. If you are playing the Bruiser Assassin or Bruiser like Lethality hybrid variant, which I really do enjoy and I recommend because I just think it's so strong in its current state, is the Cleaver, Hubris, Edge of Night, Steric, GA. It gives you access to so much damage and so much like fighting power. I think it is very strong in its current state. And yeah, that is my pick of the patch. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.